Ki hei mauri ora ki te whaiao ki te ao marama, hara mai, hara mai, hara mai. Hara mai ki tēnei whare karakia, hara mai ki tēnei hui, tēnei te ringa hora ki a koutou. I runga i te mata o rongo kako, te kara nema nema, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te reo, tēnā koutou, hara mai. Hara mai ki tēnei hui, i runga i te kaupapa wai ora, wai Māori, mō tātou, te hapuri whānui tunu o te matua Māui. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou i runga i te ahua o tēnei whare nei, nā reira me ino i tātou. He hono re karoria ki te atua he maungarongo ki te whenua he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Hanga e te atua he ngā kauhau, ki tēnā o tātou. I runga hei tohi a mātou. Hei tau te rangi Māori ki a tātou i tēnei rā. Mā te atua matua, mā te atua tama, mā te atua wairua tapu. Mana e te aki, e manaki, e arataki tēnei rā. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Welcome everybody. Welcome into this house of worship, which is our Manaki house for the next 2 days. Welcome to this important symposium on water. Welcome to this take so dear to our hearts, our minds, our souls. On behalf of the leadership of Hawke's Bay today, it's my opportunity to open up the proceedings. Before we pass it on to Lawrence Yule, to Rex Graham and to Kevin Snee. This morning it is my pleasure to open up this hui and talk about the Māori perspective. Over the next 2 days we have a kaleidoscope of presenters from all aspects, from all facets of fresh water and the environment. So, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts. We're about to embark on this journey that is at the foremost of our thoughts, has been over the last year, and it will be over the next 2 years as we move forward. So my job in the first instance is to present to you from a tikanga and whakapapa perspective what fresh water, wai Māori, means to us. And so without further ado, we're going to go straight into it, and my presentation is the whakapapa that we know as Ngāti Kahungunu relating to the wai, and it goes back to one of our old classic standards, pene te kura. Pene te kura is a ora iori or waiata or a lullaby that we sing to our children as they're in the womb. And then I'm going to pass it on to Harlem, one of our rangatahi, who will then express it. You see it expressed through the eyes of this elderly gentleman, and then you'll see it expressed through the eyes of one of our young leaders yet to come. So, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. We'll go to the presentation now. Pene te kura. It's about giving birth, giving life to this new, it's giving birth and giving new life to the new generation. And I've got one of these. This is a paperless hui, and everything you need to know is on the website. So you go to the Hastings District Council Symposium website and you will see the program and you'll see everything else if you haven't got it now. First of all, in case of any emergency, the exits are well lit up, and please move to those if that arises. Secondly, the wharapaku, the ablutions are at the back to my left, directly, and you turn to your left as well. And so to the presentation. Pene te kura is we talk about our newborn growing up in the womb, and we sing to them. We talk about the pathway through life as this new seed is growing within the womb of our whare tangata, the womb of our pregnant woman. We talk about the water that surrounds them as the whenua, and the cleanser of that water as the whenua. The whenua we also call the land. So the whenua in the womb we call a placenta. The whenua of our earth we call the land. And so the land cleanses the water that gives birth to new life, to new generations, to new growth. We say in Māori, when we first meet each other, ko wai koe, no wai koe, mo wai koe. Wai is water. We say, which waters birthed you? Who was your mother? Who was your ancestors? What womb did you come out of? Which was the water that sustained your family, that sustained your hapu, that sustained your people, your iwi? This is the most important thing to us. Water. Which is the water that gave life to you as a person, to you as a community, to you as a nation. This is our first introductory step to who we are. Who gave you your first footsteps? Which water gave you life so that you could grow from the embryo into the fetus, into a newborn baby? This is how we also personify the environment. Which water gave your people sustenance, gave your people life, gave your people ability to thrive. And so my opening statement is water is a taonga. What is a taonga? Taonga is something so precious, so special, you will go to war on. A taonga is so precious, so special, you'll put yourself on the line for. A taonga is so dear, so cherished, you'll die for. That's what a taonga is for us. And that's how we see fresh water. And now I introduce Harlem Ihaya. This is from the whakapapa's perspective. I'm now going to introduce Harlem to talk about it through a young person's eyes. Hara mai.
Kia ora tātou. Okay, so we are gathered here today to talk about the future of our water, right? Yes, aye, kia ora. Okay, so I believe to plan a future for our water, we need to know the importance of water, and we need to have a personal connection towards water. So that's what my presentation is about. He taonga te wai, taonga, precious gift. Why gives life? Why is sacred? We are as pure as the water we consume. The water we consume is only as pure as its environment. Okay, if I refer to this photo of a wahine carrying her taonga, human life. In this PowerPoint, I'll refer to taonga for human life and taonga as a wai. When women are blessed with the taonga of life, humanity, a baby, we are expected to change the environment of this taonga, the baby, by changing habits, eating proper kai, so that our taonga, the pepe, is to grow in a healthy environment. We are willing to change to provide a good whenua for human life. But are we willing to change to provide a good whenua for natural life and life beyond our own? Let's look at it like this. This photo of the whenua is the body of the mother. The taonga of the mother is the baby. The taonga of the whenua is water. We should be conserving water. We should be looking after our wai by not littering. We should see water like a human baby. If we can change to provide a good, healthy environment for the taonga of humanity, we can change to provide a healthy environment for the taonga, whenua, water. Our water provides the growth of natural life, such as trees, fish, animals, flowers. Why do we lack personal connection to the most precious taonga of the whenua? Without water, there would be no life on earth. Water, wai, has MAURI, energy and life force. Many of us sitting here tap into this energy without even knowing. Where would you choose to take your relaxing dream holiday destination? I'm sure most of us would pick places like these, close to rivers, beaches and lakes. This is where we tap into the energy, MAURI of wai, without even knowing. Bit of technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. I'd like to end on the story from our First Nations whānau. A First Nation mentor asked the man this question: what is of true value? What is of true life, true worth? The man said all the answers that he could come up with, but his mentor did not accept any of his answers. The mentor then said to the man, I want you to go to the forest, and you are not to leave there until you give me a satisfactory answer for what is of true worth, what is of true value. The man agreed. He stayed in the forest. 24 hours later, the mentor returned and said, what is of true value? What is of true worth? He was left in the forest with no water and no food. The mentor returns the next day. This is the second day he has been in the forest. And he says to the man, what is of true value? What is of true worth? The man cries and he doesn't come up with an answer. The mentor then leaves. He returns the third day. The man has gone 3 days without water, 3 days without food. The mentor says, what is of true value? What is of true worth? The man breaks down and he says, water. Then the mentor says, water is sacred, but you have never been thirsty in your whole life. Food is sacred, but you have never been hungry in your whole life. You have never been cold in your whole life, and you have never been hot. This is why it is such a challenge to train you, because you only know privilege. Water is the new gold, it always was. Wars will be fought over water. Water is sacred. Water is life. Hawke's Bay, we are privileged. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Harlem Cruz. Those of you who have never seen Harlem Cruz before, she is the Hawke's Bay candidate in the final 20 for the Miss New Zealand Universe competition. So, homai te pakipa. Now, we're ahead of ourselves. You know, they say Māori time is a bit behind, but we're 10 minutes ahead. So what I'm going to do now is ask the co-hosts. I'm going to run this morning session. Lawrence is going to run the afternoon session, Kevin Snee tomorrow morning, and Rex Graham tomorrow afternoon. But I'm just going to invite the co-hosts to say a few words before we go on to our next presenter. Kia ora.
Thank you, Ngāhiwi, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here to be part of this important symposium. And at the outset, I really want to outline what its purpose is. It is a collection of the best data and information we know about what's happening on the Heretaunga Plains. It's as simple as that. The collection of all the science, all the values, and Ngāhiwi's just articulated some of those, all the challenges we face, and all the technology and processes we're using to manage water. It's nothing more than that, actually. And what we're hoping is we can have an interactive session with you. We can give you the best information we have so that everybody can actually improve their understanding of, one, what we've got, how precious it is, how we're managing it, and what are some of the decisions that are going to have to be made in the future. And some of these things will be confronting for all of us, but only by understanding what's going on can we actually look after and manage things better. So I just wanted at the outset to say that's my intention for the next 2 days, and I hope it's the intention, I think it is, of all the other partners. And actually, we want you to be able to participate, to freely ask questions, even the hard ones, so everybody here and as members of the media can get a better understanding of the complexity of what everybody's trying to manage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Ngāhiwi. I would also like to welcome everyone here today, and I see this as a session, very much like Lawrence sees it, as interactive. So we don't want to have this as just a bunch of speakers get up. Of course, we want to hear some experts and people to tell us their points of view, but we also want you to tell us what you think. We've had a dreadful crisis in our community, which we all have to share responsibility. No one person was to blame. A whole bunch of people share in the responsibility of what happened. And we have to face that. And we have to face a whole lot of other things too. We have to face some of the things that we've done that we've taken for granted in the past that we just can't do in the future. We have to take a really good look at ourselves and say, what have we done wrong? Not just what have we done wrong in that particular incident, but what are we doing wrong generically in our society, and especially in reflection on our plains, and how do we fix it? And that will be hard for some people, because some of the activities which we've taken for granted no longer are suitable around water. And we heard today, and it was that wonderful presentation, and I really wish you luck on the Miss World. I think you'll do well. Because you're brainy as well. We just don't want beautiful women winning Miss World, we want brainy people winning Miss World. But something that I've learned in this journey is that the Māori perspective is quite different from the Pākehā perspective, and that's all part of the journey too. So we come together as one people for the good of everyone here who lives in our province, because it's not just about, it's about everything coming together holistically, and that is that we need jobs. People need jobs, but they also need to live in a clean and healthy environment. So it's about having an economy that runs in harmony with our environment. We're only talking about Heretaunga here today, but it's the place that you and I and all the people behind me live in and love dearly, and I've been here all my life. So I won't say anything more, but except to say that I hope we all enjoy this. I hope we all get something from it. And we go out of here as better people. And I have to give my apologies. At 10 o'clock, I have to go to a meeting with the Ombudsman. I'm in trouble again. I seem to spend my life getting in and out of trouble. But so I'll have to leave you for an hour then. But apart from that, I intend to spend the whole 2 days here. Thank you very much.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Kevin Snee. I'm the Chief Executive of the District Health Board. I'm going to be talking tomorrow, so I don't need to say very much now, apart from to welcome you here. I think the key message I want to give both now and tomorrow is this is about how we protect our water. Our water is Tonga. But it is also, probably at least as importantly, if not more importantly, about how we work together as a set of agencies, not just the District Council, the DHB, the Regional Council, but all of the local government and public organisations with business in Hawke's Bay. Not just about Hastings, it's about Hawke's Bay to me. There are lessons in what happened in the water crisis, both the run-up to it and what's happened subsequently, that we should take note of in the way that we as public organisations work to provide a better environment and better services for the people of Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Lawrence. Well, our next presenter is Māori Apatu. Māori Apatu is the Kaihautu, or the Taiwhenua head of Taonga. Kaihautu was someone at the back of the waka in the ancient sailing, paddling days that kept the beat. They kept the beat so all rowers went in time. So, Māori, I hope everybody's rowing in time at the Taiwhenua. And please give me a hand for Māori Apatu. By the way,
yes.
I'm a timekeeper as well. I'm going to be pretty vigilant. 10 minutes. Turn the lights up.
Oh, well, kia ora everybody, and kia ora to everyone that's behind me too as well. I'm just trying to do a connection back to Harlem. Was Bessie your mum or grandmother? Grandmother. Well, back in the day when I was a young fella, and she looked like this one here. She was an icon. She was a Tonga. So tēnei te mihi atu. Well, look, I've got a number of different visuals in amongst the slides that I've got. And I just want to start off. I'm getting close and friendly. I'm bringing to you your own backyard. As Ngahiwi has eloquently described along with Harlem what our Māori world and perspective is. On the column you'll see, where do I come from? Where do my waters flow from? And they've been answered. And the very sacred part, that top picture that shows our Māori world view. I am of the Sky Father, Rangi Nui, and of also the Earth Mother, Papa Tuanuku. So we've got this evolving process where both Rangi and Papa Tuanuku had 70 siblings, deities and controlled of different elements. Anyway, the veins in our body. No too dissimilar in terms of the veins of Tangaroa that run through the veins of Papa Tuanuku. Right at the very top there, in the Kaimanawa Ranges, Ngaruroro is a tupuna awa. Ngaruroro stems from the Kaimanawa. In your own backyard, you've got the most pristine, high-valued ecological biodiversity part of North Island on your back doorstep. And it's fortunate that we still, as Māori owners, occupy spaces from the Kaimanawas as it meanders its way from the top of the Kaimanawas. It heads past the lands of Ōwhāko. Ōwhāko C7 is majority owned by Māori tangata whenua and Here Taonga. Those pristine waters, that backdrop. As it starts to meander its way past Kuripāpango and into Whanawhana, what then starts to happen is that there's a join of some of the major arteries between Whanawhana, which is the Tāruaro River, right through to Marae Kākoho. What that Whanawhana photo tries to demonstrate, just to the left of it, this is where we start to get land use. And of course the runoff practices that are now coming into our tupuna awa Ngaruroro. Once upon a time it flowed during the mid-1800s, but subject to floods in the late 1800s. It used to meander to the back of Havelock here, around, and make its way back to Whakatū from Roy's Hill around this area. In the 1970s, 60s, 70s, there was a major diversion at Pakowhai. And what it did was it cut off the stem of waterway which went through to Clive, past Kohupātiki Marae. And that last inset is Tucker's, by where you would see Tucker's wool scarers today stood Tāne Nui Arangi. And you can see by that particular image how different the landscape was, you know, through Mother Nature, that it's been eroded in a number of places. But I just want to acknowledge first and foremost two things that have happened. One is we've got Operation Pātiki and we've got the whānau that have been aspiring to bringing back and restoring and enhancing the MAURI, the energy, the life force on the river. And as well, and I've been a bit remiss, in that pristine environment going back up to Ōwhāko, if we're looking at a mechanism that's going to protect the biodiversity values, pristine environment, then such things as a water conservation order seems to be a means in order for us to protect this as a community. The next three slides, this is it with technology. Okay, let's have a go here, maybe. It ain't gonna work. The other one. Put it that way. Oh, by golly. Oh, maybe they can just do that for me up the front there. Excuse. Okay. The next three slides are going to be a little walk and a journey chronologically over the last 25, 26 years. And I want to start off when then the chairman of the Tai Whenua Ngāhiwi Tamona, we were around about 1991 in front of an international land sustainable forum over in Napier, hosted, and I couldn't recall, I was trying to get a hold of Viv Mole. So were we still Regional Council or Hawke's Bay County Council? But anyway, because we were concerned as tangata whenua what was happening to our environment, Ngāhiwi went on stage and he quoted and he laid an invoice in front of the audience and in front of the conference. And basically what it said was that through surface and groundwater takes, something like 0.55 billion cube megs of water, we are going to charge use $1.85 per metre cube, and that equates to $1 million. Well, we said this was our intention to put that money, 1.85 cents of cube of water, back in terms of restoring and enhancing our environment. Back then, we were concerned about how our waterways were open to stock, intrusion, and those sorts of things. That our values, our principles, our cultural imperatives, knowledge of matauranga Māori said, first and foremost, the river, the awa comes first. Secondly, the people must follow. And thirdly, that industry, because we're a part of welcoming an industry, must follow. Well, this is what happened. Let me just get that next one up there, pointed. Yep, there was a gasp and a pause of silence. A gasp and a pause of silence. $1 million bill had been put before this audience. It shocked the conveners and the people responsible for the conference. Gasp. But the only ones that seemed to have taken and got up and applauded us were the Fijians. And the funny thing about when you see what's happening over in Fiji, insofar as the water rights, they've added a tax in terms of the water bottling plants they have over in Fiji. Well, this is just a short synopsis of where we've come from over the last 25 years. When the RMA first come in, we looked at it with awe. And I think we still look at it today as, wow, we're totally in awe. Then there was the pursuit of putting claims in to protect the very things that we were looking at being precious in as taonga. And as I start to scroll through this, you'll start to see those figures are not too far off. The percentages around what our total water consent takes, groundwater, surface, represent in terms of the user types. You know, the real funny thing is that part of the appeals process on the karamu, on the ngaruroro, Back in the day, it cost $50 to actually take an application if you were opposed. And now that's gone up to $500. But we took 50 applicants to the Environment Court, costing us back then $50. $50 an application. And amongst that were our own people. My own whānau, the Apatu farms, amongst them all. So we didn't take this as, we'll separate out these people and we'll just pick on these people. We've put our own skin in the game to protect our cause. The real bizarre thing about it is, following the boop. Okay, front. Oh, here you go, front. Following on the words that we had been left by our kaumātua, people such as Eri Smith, Boy Tamona, and other people, kaumātua, they kept on saying to us, look, face to face, kanohi ki te kanohi, pokahiwi ki te pokahiwi, shoulder to shoulder, and work through all of those issues. It's better to participate rather than litigate. At times, we've taken both the Hastings District Council to court and also the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to court. But we've got to find a pathway by which we can find the best outcomes. We're all part of those key drivers that's going on in this economy, so that we're not just cultural. I just want to make that quite clear. We come from a values, cultural, strength-based position, but it doesn't deny us our ability to participate in this economy. And so those key drivers, we're all a part of it, but we take a precautionary approach. And in this space, we've had a number of things occur. One is, which is quite bizarre, has been the outcome of the Heretaunga Tamatea settlements process. It's about to bring a settlement to Heretaunga Tamatea hapu. And amongst that package is $5 million. In order to enhance the waterways. Now, it seems quite bizarre. Settlements are really about grievance that a hapu has suffered. And here we are fixing up our waterways. And we've dedicated this number in order for hapu to proactively step into their role, their responsibility as kaitiaki. And in order to support their role through enhancement projects, riparian management, plant planting, this has been set aside. It's looking to be coming out sometime next year. But there's an acknowledgement that I just want to make insofar as relationships, trying to forge a better way by which to relate with each other. Well, we started that back in 2012 with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. We were and I'm sure there may be some of you in the audience, the antagonistic submitter, going through to hearings. And of course, we started this relationship in order for the Regional Council to support the Tai Whenua Heretaunga, support our hapu, produce hapu management plans. And today, 3 years after that initial 3-year contract with each other, the Tai Whenua has carried on. So we are fortunate to have 1.8 FTE within the Tai Whenua, with a board and land trusts around us, consisting of 12 members, and including land trusts. Where does that go? Hey, how come I'm not pointing it to the right one? That one. Where are you? To just describe the broad expanse of Ngāti Kahungani tribal area, from the top of the Awa Whareratas, Paritu, Taiatu, to right down to Wairarapa and Tūrakirai. The modern conventions have been set up in terms of 6 Tai Whenua. Something like about 80 or 90 marae, and probably double hapu. Within Heretaunga, which is the marae that you see before you. Part of our role is just to try and influence decisions. As I said, I've been told, instructed actually, it's better to participate than litigate. But many of the national bottom lines are considerably lower. Okay, I better move along. The regional plan needs to give effect to the proper limits and targets. They're key to all of this. Oh, man. How do I get this? We've been indoctrinated with values and principles from these people and these sorts of source documents. That was that one. I think I've wasted a minute trying to find where to click this thing. And very shortly, MAURI Black will be talking about some of the work that we've been working in terms of values and attributes. Ding, ding, come on. You know, the makaroro, these are the very things that we don't want to be going back to. What's just occurred with the Campbellabacter? The amount of people that were affected here in Havelock, the dollars that were spent. Here is a list of all the things that we don't want to happen in the future going forward, that we need to adjust and correct. From the top of the makaroro, and that's a really, really important slide. In amongst this valley here is going to be potentially the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme Dam. Are we going to allow that to be flooded? That's the question. Here are these valuable taonga in your backyard. Boom. If there's anything that I want us to walk away to get today is, let's all agree, water is a taonga. Well, we've got all the leaders that are here, and the thing is that we have to be influencing their decision to create the best outcomes. So, I just say, let's work collectively on this. Let's work in the true spirit. And as for that invoice, it's 30 years overdue. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
And I think interest rates were about 9% at that time. Now, you've heard Māori talk about not only will we protect, it's not Māoris versus Pākehās, that's what he was saying. We've had to sue our own families. We've had to sue our own treaty co-claimants. We've had to sue each other in order to protect our right to pure water. And I think that was a key statement from that. Now, our next speaker is MAURI Black. MAURI is from the MAURI Protection Agency. MAURI is a word that describes the life force. If you break it into two parts, MAURI, it's for the uri, it's for the next generation. We're protecting the life force now, MAURI, for the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. So the MAURI Protection Agency, protecting our water for the next generation, is the basis of MAURI's kōrero. Please put your hands together for MAURI Black. And after MAURI, if you've got a program, you'll see that we're quite a way ahead. So we're going to open it up to the floor. You can quiz everybody that's on the stage, because we mightn't get them all back on the stage again together. So, homai te paki, put your hands together for MAURI Black.
No, it's all right. Kia ora koutou katoa. I hope I can drive this thing. Which button is it? There. Okay, I haven't got a lot of pretty pictures. I work within the legislation space. It can be pretty boring reading legislation. When you read an act or that, there's no pictures in it. So with the this is sort of where I've been working for the iwi authority, and then also branching out into the different tai whenua. Currently I'm down in Tamaki Nui Arua. Also do some other stuff, and really liking the move into environmental education and a bit of social work. Hey, backwards. Okay, so Regional Council does a lot of stuff around the water. I've been battling with Regional Council for a while, about 20 odd years, and mostly to do with trying to ensure that Māori values relating to water are taken into account and when they make their decisions. So all of these things here, you know, they are something to do with the water and the authority that the regional council has through legislation. The building control and consent processing, that's more about dams and things like that. I think for dams, a lot of the regional councils in the North Island have delegated that role to Waikato Regional Council. But the other things, they all affect our water. Okay, so value systems. This is sort of generalising a little bit, but you know, Western world view, the male dominant sort of leader. The Māori world view is around whānau, male, female together, papa tuanoku, ranganui. Progress, economic development, move on, get bigger, faster, sooner. Whereas Māori tend to think more around balance, a holistic approach. Individual wealth, individual growth for business enterprise. Māori also get into this, so there's a bit of a blend happening, but basically focused for Māori around whānau, hapu, iwi. Spiritual element, the wairuatanga brings a sense of ethics to what Māori do, compared to the commodification of the environment, elements within the environment, a tradable commodity, water being sort of traded, sold overseas, whatever. Within that space, we think that Indigenous people should have a greater consideration, their values around water. Exclusive, inclusive, pulling things apart to deconstruct the different elements. Now this manifests itself within the science world. We study things down to the nth degree, and you know, get to know more and more and more about less and less and less. That's not to be an insult, that's about, science. You study minute things and influences, and sometimes you get down to the atomic level. Past, present, future. We need to go back to see where we made our mistakes in the water space. Can we learn from that, or do we just repeat history and keep making the same mistakes? Yeah. Okay, values and uses. So, mana motuhake, mana Māori motuhake, the right to determine our own future and our own outcomes with our taonga. Spiritual identity and health. Now tends to be a application of a generic nature around Māori values, but within here taonga we need to elevate the hapu sense of value, because sometimes they may differ to another hapu that lives within another part of the catchment. This is very important to consider. So how things are interpreted, even the reo, even the Māori language has its differences, its colloquialisms, its sort of different types of elements and sayings that belong within a specific area. And, upoko iri up the top of the Ngāradoro or out at Omahu will translate their values and express their values completely different to a hapu that is living down near the coast. So they need to be able to do that in their own way, in their own form, put their own shapes to things. And the interaction, the tikanga, the mātauranga that flows from that interaction is something for them to determine and interpret for themselves, and I believe for authorities to take into account. Right. Okay, so just some of the things, the processes that we learn and how we can use these in our monitoring and measuring. So there is an element within Western science that can then express the state, the current state of a part of the environment, a river, a stream, a wetland. But that is from a Western science view. We believe that we need to be able to express it in our own way. I see it as a parallel process. There will be some overlaps where we can build on each other's knowledge, but the mana of our hapu must be able to grow and extend itself outwards within its own space. Whakawhanaungatanga, I'd just like to say a little bit more about that. That is, there's a whole sense of well-being around whakawhanaungatanga where extended families get together and enjoy things and learn from each other, and you get that better sense of emotional sort of well-being. And then that is underwritten or underpinned by the different Māori values and through that interaction. Our wānanga. Wānanga is a process of learning, a process of interaction around different things. We're looking to reconnect with our awa in a more concentrated way, and hopefully this can then inform state of the environment monitoring, so that we are able to, our hapu are able to express their values at a higher level.
2 minutes, ding ding.
There's a lot of measurement going on. So medians, averages, there's exceptions allowed for some consents, different percentiles, different habitat, all that sort of stuff. But for Māori values and interests within the water space, it's about the reality. It is not the average or the median that does the damage, it's the highs and the lows. So it's the higher concentrations, which when you read some science data, or it's the interpreted science data, it's been averaged out, so it's often difficult to pick up. Nitrate toxicity is a growing concern, and I think we have to deal with some of that cyanobacteria stuff, put a limit on that somehow and stop it from spreading. Okay, so this is a bit of history where we've, I won't go through all of it, you're probably all familiar with it, but it's about where we were saying don't do this, don't do that, don't lower the minimum flow, don't take more water out. And as Mare expressed, had to go through courts and litigation with limited success, but now it's come around again and we're trying to address it through the tank process. Okay, so this is what we were saying. Leave the water in, don't take more out, don't drop the minimum flow. The problem here was that the Ngāraroro allocation model was applied to all other major catchments, and today we're living with the legacy of that. Yeah, pretty serious stuff. Economics seems to be a priority for economics. MPI and MFE sort of in the same space. It's similar to the US model where the EPA over there and industry and commerce, they have an open door policy around how the environment is managed. The transfer of public good to private enterprise, that it increases property values. It can sometimes double the value of a property if it in between non-irrigated and irrigated. And then the public pay for that in various ways. I see there was a proposal out a few months ago about creating a water environmental fund to help clean up Lake Tūtera, and that'll be generally rated, not actually the people who cause the damage.
Ding ding.
So yeah, science stuff, cumulative adverse effects. I'd just like to touch on that. Where wells are first tested, well, usually they used to be done in June, and when no other wells were pumping, just to gauge the effects of one single well. But the combined effect of numerous wells pumping together in the summer wasn't actually taken into account. And I guess this is what I'm about, is about the kids being able to get down to the awa and enjoy it. And it's, yeah, so that's about me. Yeah. Kia ora.
Thank you, Maury. So what we've just seen is a progression from our tikanga and our whakapapa to a rights defence, which Māori put up, to where we get quite sophisticated when we fuse our cultural measurements with scientific measurements. And we have a sophistication now that is able to measure and monitor the state of the water through two lenses. So put your hands together, homai te paki paki, for our last two presenters. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Adele White. Is she here? Oh, there she is. Dr. Adele White has been working at another level, working at a political level, ensuring, with Nick Smith and co, ensuring that the swimmable standards that they've been promoting, or the wadeable standards, become swimmable, and from swimmable to become drinkable. So Adele's been working at that level and trying to push the RMA up another notch, while we've been working at local level to try and push the standards up another notch. So I'd just like to acknowledge Adele in that regard. Homai te paki paki. Right, now we've got quarter of an hour up our sleeves. This is the last time you'll see Mare and Mauri and Harlem on stage. If you have any questions specifically to them or directed at anybody in general, now's your chance. You've got all of them on stage. Now's your chance to ask any question you want. And I want a question. I don't want a whole whakapapa. I don't want a whole party political manifesto. If you've got a question, be sharp, and you'll get I'll ensure you get a sharp answer back. So open to the floor. Is there a roving microphone? And if you could stand and just identify yourself and then ask a question, please. We've bought ourselves some time, so don't be shy.
Sick. Okay. Kia ora koutou, a koutou. E rua ngā paitai, ko Jenny Major hau, local, tangata whenua. What is the place of karakia in what you've presented so far? I'll wait.
The second one, are they related?
Yes, the second one is, sorry I didn't list my pātai electronically. What is the place of United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the 20-something articles, which was predominantly written by Moana Jackson, no konei, no Aotearoa, and also that the place in the United Nations Permanent Forum for Indigenous Issues, because what you've presented so far, I would think sits squarely in those fora. Kia ora.
In terms of karakia, sacrosanct. It is part of our traditions, rituals and beliefs. It is at this very conference the start to invoke the presence of our terrestrial down into the celestial. And so in order to invoke, we're demanding the presence of our celestial gods to enable this particular process to proceed. It's the Māori, the gathering of Māori and energy to flow. So Jenny, I hope that the place of karakia, because there's different karakia for different situations as well. The karakia that Ngahiwi gave to us today, it is about people gathering, people being collectivised and better informed, and to invoke the presence of our deities to ensure that over the next 2 days that we're going to sustain the level of conversation. So when you apply it to other forms of different things, wahi tapu, for example, karakia is to enable spiritual safety through those particular things. Does that kind of help? It's a generic form, so we could be here. In fact, that's a whole wānanga on its own, to give it its simplest form. So I hope that's done some justice for those generally wanting to understand what karakia is all about. Kia ora.
And the Treaty of Waitangi guaranteed full and exclusive authority over our rivers, our forests, and our precious things, our taonga. So the United Nations Declaration Rights of Indigenous Peoples supports that. I'm pleased to say that this government has now adopted the United Nations Declaration Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and have appointed one of the ministers, Tudor Flavel, to look at how to operationalise that around the country. But again, Adele's been working in that arena at political level, at cabinet level, with a series of cabinet technicians as well. So it is being looked at. It's about how do we operationalise it. Next question. And you can ask it to anybody.
I'd just like to ask, how is it possible that our leaders sell off artesian water when we've got to drink the stuff here with chlorine and fluoride in it? How can they start underground water, suck it up and sell it to the Chinese? Why are the Chinese drinking up my water? Why can't I drink fresh underground water? Thank you.
Does anyone want to answer that?
Well, I'll answer it in a sense in that I completely get the concern and about it. But the current legislative framework in New Zealand does not actually treat one type of water use any different to anybody else. So the regional council who allocates the water for every use, whether it's to give to the Hastings District Council to use it, to an irrigator or an industry, largely affects that on the impacts on the environment. That's the assessment, and to make sure it follows the plan rules. They actually make no decision on its end use, apart from the fact that human consumption is an order of priority of uses. Human consumption's meant to be one of the top level uses, then it's animals and then it's industry, etc. The bottling of water actually fits as an industrial type use of it, and the current laws in New Zealand do not allow anybody to charge for water in one sense, and two, to differentiate a use one from another. So if it satisfies the current laws in New Zealand, the regional council actually really has very limited ability to do much about it, unless the law is changed. So it's a high level political issue. It's not something that really can be determined locally. But I completely respect and understand and share the concerns you're expressing, but we have to actually find some solutions to try and fix it.
I just want to address the heart of your question, which is not that we're giving away water to Chinese, but that the Chinese are drinking water they're collecting straight out of our aquifer. And so am I, at my house. So how come they can do it and I can do it and the rest of us who are living in our cities can't? That's got me perplexed as well.
So by the end of the conference, we would like a direction of travel for all of Hawke's Bay. That we may be able to fix up things legislatively today or tomorrow. We may not be able to fix things up in terms of policy and plan. But if we could get a direction of travel from this symposium over the next 2 days, then we're going to try our utmost to implement and operationalise it. And if it means having to go and try and change laws and try and change local edicts, then I'm totally in favour of that. Question, no, time for 2 more questions. In the middle and then over here. Rex has just left because he knew there was one being aimed at him.
Hi, I'm Bill Stacey. A question to MAURI Apatu. You mentioned that a $5 million compensation had been awarded. How's that going to be distributed?
I guess the detail of that is still yet to be worked out, but how's that going to be distributed? So this claim represents something like about 25 marae hapu from the Ngaruroro right down to central Hawke's Bay, Waipukurau. I guess this is going to be a process where certain criteria, I would hope, would need to be set up in terms of what specifically is going to be the plan, the aspirations of marae and hapu, but it's not too disfamiliar with what we're hearing from marae hapu that have got proactive and active kaitiaki on their waterways. They are the people with many faces that surround both intergeneration that are out there already. So haven't got the detail of that yet. We're still waiting for it to arrive at this point in time. I've got committees that are working around exactly what would justify the allocation and distribution, and there's going to be some hard questions to those respective marae and hapu.
Final question over here.
Kia ora ngā hiwi, and thank you for everybody. But this question's pretty generic through the whole presentation. My name's Alan Matthew Smith. I come from a beautiful place called Wairoa, and a beautiful place where my tipunas come from, of a beautiful place called Waikaremona. The question is, and the dying question is, with the urban environment growing over the next decade, what a surety is for small places like Wairoa that our resources will not be taken because of what dynamics are happening in here in the urban environment. Because what we hear and see is around the table talking without consultation with the mana whenua and the people around as Māori. Why I try and say it's a public, beautiful place, Waikaremona, just the same as Wairoa, Whakaki, right through there. But we are afraid there's going to be in-house conversations without Māori involved. Kia ora.
Well, I can't actually speak for Wairoa, but I think if you look at the way we've approached this, the way we have got all the councils in the region to look at setting up a new entity to look at the provision of safe drinking water as the #1 priority, and we have invited iwi and Māori representatives into that grouping. Because if you assume, and the chairman of the regional council and myself announced about 2 weeks ago, that we'd met with the staff and said that the provision of safe drinking water was the #1 priority for both of our councils. And in Wairoa, those same conversations should be going on with the regional council and the Wairoa District Council as well. And that is about respecting and understanding. There's a number of people in this room that have been to a symposium that we held in Wellington on Monday and Tuesday. And I gave a scenario there, which I'm going to give, I'll only mention it once. But effectively, what we've done in New Zealand is cut down the trees, drained the swamps, imported grasses to improve production, imported fertiliser to grow more things. That's actually how we've built New Zealand. For 150 years, that's what we've been doing. And in simple terms, we've probably gone a bit far. And we need to take the pendulum back. And part of this conversation is about understanding that. It's about the time frames and the targets and everybody being connected to make that happen. That's my simple and holistic view of it. And when you talk to people about that, they generally get it. So I hear lots of criticism of farmers. Farmers have just done what they've been encouraged to do to grow New Zealand. I hear very little criticism from urban people about urban issues. So a lot of water quality issues in large urban centres are actually really significant. Tyres, brake linings, stormwater, they're big issues to solve. So my approach to this is that it's not us and them, this is all of us. And as New Zealand, we're a small nation, we have lots of water per head of population, sometimes in the wrong places at the wrong time, but we can actually fix this. And what I'm encouraged about the comments you're making is we are genuinely reaching out to try and make that holistically. And in my observation, some of the things that I've heard Ngahiwi and MAURI, they've taken us to court on the odd occasion. But you know what? They've been right. And it's taken us a while to catch on, and I think we're there now. Thank you.
If I can add to that, if you take the example of the work that's gone on locally in Hawke's Bay in economic development, the original work that was done wasn't inclusive of Māori, and it wasn't very good, to be frank. And it was only when Māori fully engaged with that work that the point that's been made already about the holistic and inclusive view that Māori brought to the table, that actually that work began to take off. And that's a really, I think, a really good example of how the point you're making is it's really important that we include all elements of the local community and not just one group.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Kevin. We had thought about taking it Hawke's Bay regional wide this symposium, but we decided to concentrate on the Heretaunga aquifer. And because this was a highly visible, not just local, not national, but international, it was a highly visible event with a Campylobacter outbreak. And we thought if we could get a consensus, a direction of travel from the people that were affected by it, both authorities, domestic households and personal people, then this could be a model that we then go to Wairoa and Waipukaro and probably a model for the rest of the country. So it's not been isolationist or specialist or elitist, but it was to see if we could create a model that was transportable to other regions. So thank you, everybody. That's the first part of a session. Please put your hands together for Māori Apatu, for Māori Black, and for Harlem Cruz Ihaya. Yeah. So I'll allow them to leave the stage. Lawrence and Kevin, you're quite welcome to stay for our next presentation. But please, everybody, just stand up and have a stretch, and I'll introduce our next speaker. By the way, there's a running cup of tea and coffee, so please feel free to go and help yourself as the need arises. So a couple of minutes break and then we'll introduce our next speaker. Lewis, can you come to the stage, please? There wasn't a signal to run to the car park. Please welcome to the podium Louis Tremblay. Louis Tremblay is French-Canadian, and so Louis, bonjour, bon matin, welcome to our symposium. Now, Lost it. Louis works for Cawthron Institution. He's been working there for the last 7 years, and he's been working with us previously with the Ahuriri estuary. His main domain is toxicology of the environment. So for the next 30 minutes, he'll be addressing us, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions and answers. Please put your hands together. Louis Tremblay.
All right, thanks very much, Ngā Hiwi. Kia ora tātou, welcome everyone. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me. I think this is the kind of forum which is very stimulating for scientists, because we tend to be a bit introverted and present with our own peers, but I think we need to put ourselves out there and contribute to issues such as the management of fresh water. I just wanted to comment a little bit on some of the previous statements, particularly around the Maori visions, which was different from the Pākehā visions, and I guess Pākehā operates, from the capitalistic. On the capitalistic model, which is short-term gain and very little care about the environment. But I think that the Maori visions, and that's why I think ecologists can understand quite well, is that the ecology also works much more, or aligns a little bit more with the Maori vision of the world. Because, and if you think about cycles, like the cycles of water and so forth. So I think what I'd like to do today, and I think a lot of what I'm going to state aligns around recognizing those cycles and understanding the natural processes and maintain integrity of the environment. And that's probably something that we've lost. Someone mentioned before that we've been overtaxing our lands in New Zealand, and it's in the world. And we need to turn back the clock. So I'm going to talk about managing contaminants. And first, I'd like to apologize for Cawthron being the power of science. This is I've been forced to put it. I like Cawthron Institute, but I don't feel very comfortable about this this motto of the power of science. But and I should also say that I have a appointment with the University of Auckland, so 1 day a week I'm with the School of Biological Sciences. So I'm going to talk about contaminants and contaminants that become pollutants, and the unintended use of the unintended consequences of contaminants, because it's not my aim to demonize chemicals, because chemicals have done a lot of good stuff and continue to do a lot of good stuff for us and to maintain our standard of living, but I think it's just a question of balance. So just to give an overview of my talk. So it should be all right. So I'll talk about ecotoxicology. So that's my really narrow area of expertise, but how it is used to manage the presence of contaminants, how guidelines are derived and so forth. And then again, I'll talk about chemicals in our growing world. As we speak, more chemicals are being designed and put on the market. So, like I mentioned before, it's a question of balancing benefit versus potential adverse impacts. But I also want to talk about solutions, and it was touched quite a bit before, but there's a need for transdisciplinary approaches. So people such as myself have to work with social scientists and work with MAURI, and then also engage the multiple stakeholders and the wider community. And I'd like also to talk about the up-the-pipe solution, which is trying to turn things around, that instead of being reactive, and myself, I tend to work a lot with chemical spills and chemical that find their ways into the environment. So try to find a way to, before it happens, what can be done. So here's the textbook definition of ecotoxicology. So we're studying the effects of natural and synthetic chemicals that enter the environment. Natural, you can think about natural toxins. Someone talked about harmful algal bloom, and this is, again, a phenomenon that's occurring more frequently. And here also, I wanted to mention the transdisciplinary nature of ecotoxicology, because there's a lot of expertise that are required, particularly around toxicology and chemistry, but a whole range of other things, like, going all the way to economics now, and also social and cultural values. I'm part of the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, and now there's a move to try to incorporate cultural values into our society, our discipline, because the recognition of Maturanga Māori is increasingly making its way, and my colleague Jamie Atari is championing it from the Māori point of view. And I think it's important to have those social inputs, and because a lot of what we're trying to do is to set environmental values, and then to determine level of protection. So to do that, we need to find out what are the values, and what is important to people. In certain instances, it's quite easy when there's a port, but there's some gray areas as well as what kind of level of protections. And then, again, it's a very anthropogenic ways to look at it. So what we're doing in ecotoxicology, I'm trying to go back here, is to look at characterizing the hazard or the harm. So when you're exposed to a chemical, something will happen. It's going to either make you sick or you'll be okay. So if it makes you sick, so what we want to know is what are the cause behind this impact, because this is what managers have to do. They have to reduce the risk, and by reducing your exposure to the causes. So why is it important? Well, we have a very, very lavish lifestyle. We're buying a lot of stuff. We're producing a lot of waste, and in those wastes, there's a lot of residual chemicals that make their way into the environment. And then that's often how I feel, is that I'm the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and at some point, when is it going to stop? I'm sorry, this is terrible. Oh, you're playing with it. Is that okay? Is that where we are? So the challenge of micropollutants. So in 2002, there was a study that was made by the US Geological Survey that looked at a range of chemicals that are mostly pharmaceuticals and personal care products. So those are chemicals that were not traditionally monitored. And they found significant levels in most surface waters in the catchments that they've studied. And that's a key publication, because to this date, I think they're close to 7,000 citations. So it's a very high impact. But that triggered a whole bunch of research, and that those guys, Schwarzenbach and his colleagues are from EWIG in Switzerland, and they went to the extent of saying that the presence of those contaminants is one of the key challenges that we're facing as a human race. So very, very important. And then, so where are these things coming from? And that's the thing, you know, what are the sources? So I was doing some work in Wellington as part of a MFE project, and we were engaging with a family there, and then we were asking, so you guys are using a lot of chemicals every day? And she said, no. So then we asked her to put all the chemicals that she had in the house, and this is what, and she was just like, wow. And so as individuals, we do use a lot of chemicals. And then those chemicals end up in that nicely pile of what we call biosolids, which is a process of the, or a product of water treatment. And then this is in addition to the traditional way of using chemicals in agriculture. And even us as individuals, if we go in the average garden shed, there's a lot of chemicals that we're using every day or on a regular basis, and that ends up into the environment. So the impacts or the cause and effect relationships between the presence of contaminants in the environment and impacts on humans is not something new. I mean, hopefully some of you read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It's a book that came out in around 2060, and where she made the link between the use of organochlorine pesticides and human health, and particularly cancer in her case. And she was suffering herself from cancer. And in the early 90s, Our Stolen Future came out. And in this case, it was chemicals or contaminants that can interfere with our hormones. And then that led to things like the feminization of fish and so forth, and particularly in the UK. So we are part of the problem because we are responsible as individuals for releasing those environments, so those contaminants, and at the same time we are part of the solution. And that's the message I think that I'd like to give today. All right, so now for a bit of nerdy stuff. I'm a lecturer, so I really like to talk about how ecotoxicology works. So this is a really key concept of how we generate information about the toxicity of a chemical. In this case, it's for metals. And then there are two types of metals. There are what we call the essential ones and the non-essential ones. The essential ones, you can talk about copper and zinc. So those chemicals are important for us because they're part of our enzymes, and they play important roles. But at the same time, they have a bad name because people associate zinc with storm water. But the thing is, it's all about what we call this window of essentiality. So here on the x-axis, you have the concentration. And here on the y, you have the performance that can be measured as survival, which is quite drastic, or more subtle effects like growth or the ability to reproduce. So for copper, so you need a certain concentration to be optimum. So if you have too much, so then that becomes toxic. But at the same time, if we don't have enough, so it also makes us sick because we're deficient. And in New Zealand, we have a really good example of that with selenium, because our soils are poor in selenium, but because of our diet that includes a lot of outside food or international food, so we can compensate. So this is how we derived those guidelines. So we want, for environmental, so we're looking at concentrations that make organisms or ourselves sick. And it's the same thing with the non-essential metals, and here you can think about cadmium. So here in this case, same concept. You have the concentration here on the X. So up to a certain threshold, our body, we can protect ourselves. We have things like methylmethionine that will capture those cadmium. But if you overcome that threshold, so then that becomes toxic. So this is how the guidelines for metals are being derived, and this is what we find in the ANZAC water quality guidelines, for instance. And internationally, it's the same thing as well. So this is for metals, but we also have similar methods for organics, so man-made chemicals. If I can get the next slide. Okay, so here's just a really stunning example of an unintended consequence of using a chemical. So diclofenac, people would be very familiar in a rugby craze country. So we use a whole lot of diclofenac. So it's an anti-inflammatory drug. It's available over the counter. So on the Indian continent, cows are sacred, are tanga. And then, so as such, someone found out that if you were giving a lot of diclofenac as a prophylactic, so when the cows were getting injured, they were recovering much faster. But the problem is that they were giving so much that when the cows were dying, and because they're sacred, they can't move them. So those other species of vultures, which are, by the way, as well sacred, were feeding on them, and then they started to die. And then up to over 95% of the population died. And then they were able to find that in their liver, there was a high level of diclofenac that was leading to renal failure. So this is, quite a caricatural example of the unintended consequence of using something that's good for something, but that has an adverse impact on something else. And we are using thousands of chemicals. I mean, this is, we've had coffee this morning, and then it's right there, and then there's caffeine in the coffee, and then caffeine is actually a tracer of sewage. So if there's a leakage somewhere in the council, so we look for caffeine, we can say, hey, it's related to sewage, so you have to patch it up. And then it makes its way into the environment. And then the thing is, there's mixtures of them. And then most of our guidelines are made for single chemicals. But what happens when they're in those soups of chemicals? And for us, as in ecotoxicology, it's a real challenge to assess the harm and then characterize the risk. Voila. So how does that relate to New Zealand, and how does it relate to the Hawkesbury region? Like Nahi, we mentioned, we did some work under Ahuriri. And then in relation to multiple stressors, here what we did, we took some sediment from at the Humber Street, which is just down by the Tyne drains, that drains the Pandora estate. And then I had some visitors from Germany that came, and then we had those samples, and I said, hey, would you run them into your bioassays? And they did, and the hypothesis was that it would be very much lower than the level of response that they get in their countries. And so just to take you quick through, so we took some samples of sediment, and we extracted them, and we looked at the chemistry, and we saw a whole range of the traditional contaminants, including zinc and the polyaromatic hydrocarbons that are associated with the combustion of fuel and so forth. And then we tested them, and we looked at endocrine activity with one of my colleagues from Australia, and then it all lit up. And then when we looked at zebrafish embryo, we're using the embryo because those are the early life stages are the most sensitive. And then at the highest concentrations, they were going belly up, or they were not even going belly up because they didn't have any belly. But, and then what we looked also at the sublethal impacts. So in the ones that were exposed to lower concentrations, so they had all the detoxifying enzymes that were being lit up. And we also looked at the degradation of their DNA, so the ability of the contaminants to have genotoxic impacts. And we saw it at all the sites. So bottom line is that there is a lot of multiple stressors in our own backyard, and then the Ahuriri is a major taonga as well for New Zealand. But what we did, we actually did some extracts. So therefore, it's not really what would necessarily happen into the environment, because it's all about looking at the bioavailability. And I did a little bit of work piggybacking on one of my colleagues, Joanne Ellis, they're doing some work in the Tauranga Harbour with Massey University. And here what they did, they took some samples of sediment across a gradient in the harbour, and then they looked under the microscope at the distribution of microinvertebrates, and then they also ran some chemistry analysis, and then they did some fancy multivariate analyses, and what they found is that they had some, major changes in the distribution of their organisms, and all those, when we put them through the statistical analysis, were all happening below the guideline limits. So what that means is that if a council was to go and collect some samples and measure zinc, cadmium, and lead, they would say that there's not any issue there. When in fact, when we look at the biology, there is actually some impact. And this is much more relevant because this is an in situ approach to look at impact. So that was another point that was brought up just before. In New Zealand, we really live in a bubble because the whole world out there is going berserk. I was in Toronto last week, and I've been gone for 20 years, and now the whole place is, there's urban sprawling everywhere, and this is just Toronto, and so the exploding population will be a major issue. And then this is just prediction by the UN. Those are numbers that I took from one of my colleagues, is that by 2050, 9.6 billion. And this is a lot of people. And if those people all have the same standard of living that we have, I mean, we're in real deep trouble. So, and 70% will be living in urban area. And then the global food production will have to increase by 50%. So, I mean, I've seen was it the broccoli that was like $8 a broccoli? And then this is just the population that we have. So what will happen when we have to feed all those people? And then by 2025, so this is less than 10 years away, so 50% of the global population will be living in water-stressed area. So this is a real challenge. And this is where my favorite quote is. My dad was an accountant, and he told me, years ago, he said, if you understand the power of compound interest, you'll be all right. And that's where it comes into place. I mean, this is the sheer number of people that have this pressure on our environment. And then the current, if we continue to have the current practices, we're in real trouble. So we know that we're going really bad, and then people from the CRI here will understand that cartoon. So we are destroying the earth, and what are we doing? We really need to come up with some solutions, and the steady as we go is no longer viable. And I think that what we need to do, and this is my humble opinion, is that we need to look at things like that. You know, this, I don't know if you're familiar with the Earth Overshoot program, but last year, on the 8th of August, we used all the resources that the planet can produce. So that means from an economic perspective, so we're deeply in the red. And the sad thing is that the year before, in 2015, that happened on the 15th of August. So we're probably going to move into July this year. So some really scary stuff. And then our use of fossil fuel is just not it's not decreasing. And now, you know, President Trump is pulling out of the Paris. But right here in New Zealand, we do our fair share as well. I was reading it in the Herald last year that 43,000 new car registration in Auckland last year, and that was viewed as a real good thing. You know, there was one of the ministers said, "Wow, our economy is going well." Well, I don't think so. And then, you know, and when you look at it, that's the other thing, and that's where individuals can make a change, is that there's 20% of household trips that are less than 2 kilometers. And then if you go to 6 kilometers, and that's me, I live 6 kilometers from my work, and I go to work by bike. And then when my neighbors look at me, you know, we have one car, they think I have a hard time to pay my mortgage. They just don't understand. But it's because we need to raise awareness about the consequences of what's happening when you're using your car. I worked in the Ahueri, and I see PEHs. Where are these PEHs coming from? It's from all of us driving our cars. This is where it's coming from. So we're part of the problem, but we're also part of the solutions. Thank you. So, and then the other thing, you know, you go to town and people all have their little disposable cups. That sounds pretty cool. 295 million cups in New Zealand. This is each year. This is incredible. I mean, you know, those things, they're no-brainers, but I think that we really need to pass on the message that we need to change the way we live. What is a sustainable family today? This is exactly it. You know, I'm not the average because we only have one car. And then they have a dog, and then some people have 2 overseas trips per year. And then all what we eat and the packaging and all that. So we need to change that model. The dog is a real good one. Every time I talk about it, people go, "What? My dog?" Well, I was talking to someone from the SPC, and there's over a million dogs in New Zealand. And this is a really good thing that came out of this book by Robert Vail. He's a colleague. He's at the University of Victoria. He's a really cool guy. And he wrote this book called Time to Eat the Dog. But he made just some estimation, and you know, you take it as but it's an estimation of the footprint of a dog, of a big dog. It's bigger than an SUV, and then he used his, and he's only driving 10,000 K. But it's just to give you an idea, and I'm not saying we all have to not have dogs, but we have to realize that all those little things that we do every day, from the time we get up in the morning to when we go to sleep, has an impact on our environment. And here we're trying to cope with, we're trying to deal with, managing water. Well, water is part of it because we need to, and it's a very Maori view of the world, but we need to look at the system. And that's how we're going to be able to, get better water and over multi-generation. And we can't even get our machines to... thanks. So my dilemma has been, I'm a very humble ecotoxicologist, and so, but I believe in science. But over the last few years, can science solve these issues? If you look at the information or the data that we have on cigarette smoking and the cause and effect relationships, it's enormous. I did a review when I was doing my PhD, that's over 20 years ago, and it was just amazing the amount of information. We know exactly that this will kill you, but people are still smoking. So this is where I started to think that we really need to work across disciplines. We need to work with social scientists, we need to work with Māori, we need to work with the wider community, and we need to work with the different levels of government, because we need to work on the little things that we need to do. We can do the little things like, this is a good bar of soap, unscented, and then you have the antibacterial one full of chemicals, and some of those chemicals we measure them, some of those chemicals we measure them in the ahuriri sediment. And in little things that we do, I go out at night, you have people that they all have their fog lights on. There's fog maybe twice a year. So why are these people having their fog lights on? And again, it's a compound interest. If there's 1 million of them, so they all use a little bit more petrol. And then in the US, they have midday free in some, I can't remember which state, but someone calculated the reduction in terms of footprint impacts just by doing this. So just the little things that we can do. You're tough on me. So, and there are some frameworks out there that can help us, and I just want quickly talk about the natural steps. Those are the 4 principles, and they all make sense. Reducing our extraction of material from the earth, reducing our dependence on chemicals, destruction of nature. Well, when you fly over Toronto or LA, it's so widespread. Who's going to feed all those billions of people if we don't have any more productive land? And then the other thing is that we shouldn't stop people from meeting their needs, and this is where the social and cultural components come into effect. And I just wanted to end on a slightly more positive note, is that so what we're trying to do in our work, so this is an initiative that I have with Australian colleagues where we want to develop an Australasian framework directive to manage what I call emerging contaminants. So those are all the contaminants that we don't look at, the outside, the metals and the PAHs and so forth. And then what we're trying to do is, get the partnerships, but then across scientists, regulators and industry. And then we're also working with Aboriginals and Māori. So, and it's all again, trying to raise awareness. And this approach is not new. It's a takeoff on the European directives. And then, this is where the nerdy stuff happened, trying to characterize the risk. And then here are the solutions, and I think that's quite important. It's okay to raise red flags, but we need to come up as well with solutions. And then this is where you have to have a vision. Someone mentioned a vision. So we want to protect human and ecosystem health, and our primary industry. And then look at what are the new field of research as well. There's things like green chemistry that are designing chemicals that do the right things but are not as persistent into the environment. And then we want to become world leader on being clean and green. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Louis. We say in our language, aha ko ngā piki me ngā heke me haere tonu. Comme si, comme ça, bonne chance aujourd'hui. So, thank you very much. We've got 10 minutes, folks, for questions, so please identify yourself. Questions, not statements or party political manifestos, all right?
Bonjour, Louis. I have a question. I'm from the Awa Karamu, and we have a sedimentation problem. We just took a core sample back in December, and it's 4 pages long that I need interpretation on. But I want to know, is there a miracle cure that you can offer to detox our sediment of all these chemicals? Because we're industrial, we're farming, and we're urbanised at our end of the river. So we have a great concern for what is lodged in our sediment. But we tried removing it, but now we're noticing certain things happening. Is it possible to detoxify that all?
Unfortunately, it's not possible. The reason I was in Toronto last year, I visited the Canadian Centre for Inland Water, which is on the Lake Ontario next to Hamilton, a very, very heavily industrial area. And their sediment, I mean, nothing lives in there. And so what they're doing at the moment, the Canadian government has allocated a huge amount of money, and then what they're going to do, they're going to cap it. They're going to start to cap it because they cannot remove it, and where would you put it? So they've accepted that it is. So unfortunately, it's often the case where some sediment is too contaminated. The best solution is to cap it. I'm sorry. This is but this is an engineering issue as well, and yeah. Sorry.
One over here.
You mentioned contaminants in the Ahuriri estuary, and I think briefly you mentioned copper and zinc. Now, the regional and county councils across this country are well aware, or their scientists are well aware of this problem, and I understand there is a move which possibly was spearheaded in Auckland to seek a ban on using or importing brake pads from vehicle brake systems that contain copper. But for this to get anywhere with central government, we'd need a united effort. Do you know if there is any move towards such a united effort?
That's a very good point. I mean, the work that we did on the up-the-pipe solutions, one of the issues was around copper and zinc that accumulates in biosolids, because biosolids would be a really good rich fertilizer, but the reason it is not used on land is because it has that really high levels of copper and zinc residues. So what we did as part of that project, we tried to look where was it coming from. Obviously zinc, you have things like anti-dandruff shampoos, and so you're not going to stop people from using it. But a lot was coming from the tapware, because builders are importing, large quantities of those cheap tapwares from China. And when we went to MFE with that, so we were said this is not for them to address that. So I guess you know, the easy solution would be to have to put it into the building code to have a certain standard. But like you mentioned, I think you need a cohesive approach all the way from the policymakers down to, you know, that aligns with those findings. So, yeah, there's up-the-pipe solutions. It applies to a whole lot of things. Like for instance, zinc that is on the roofing, because that's where it's coming a lot from brake pads as well. And then that comes into the storm water, and then ends up in estuaries and coastal zones.
Thank you.
So sorry.
One question over here. At the front. Oh. Okay, we'll take two.
Yes, good morning. My name's Chris Ryan. I wish there were far more scientists like you who are very presentable and very knowledgeable, because it's been very apparent over many years that our basic knowledge of science and biology in districts like this is pretty appalling, which is why we've gone so far down the track with many issues and we're still not making any progress. Is it possible for people like you to make far more appearances on TV, present articles to our local paper? Because we get some total rubbish, and I think we need a lot more people upskilling in their scientific knowledge. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. I think it's something that we need to do more, but at the same time, we have to be very choosy and picky about those types of activities, because you know, we have our science that we have to progress in the background, and in order for me to have you know, the level of pertinence, you know, I need to maintain my science. So that's why I need to work with colleagues and partners that are, you know, better than me to communicate. And but the knowledge that I have and that my other colleagues is distributed, because raising awareness, I think this is the new thing. We need to pass. We can't be in our ivory towers anymore. But thank you very much for that. It's
One
much
last
appreciated.
question behind you, and then we'll go to morning tea. And then anybody wants to catch up with Louis, you'll have to catch him over morning tea.
Thank you for your presentation. My comment might differ from the previous one. My name's Annabeth, and I work for Forest and Bird as a freshwater conservation advocate. And I agree with you that everyone needs to do their part, but I don't think we should forget about the political drivers that maybe overshadow everyone from doing their part. You know, I'm the first one to say I could probably get rid of my cats, or recycle a little bit more, or buy local a little bit better. But you mentioned the 1 million dogs in New Zealand, and there are about 6.5 million dairy cows in New Zealand. So we are outnumbered by dairy cows, and we're increasing at a rate that we're about to catch up with the United States, which has about 9.5 million dairy cows. So we really can't forget about the political drivers that are causing the sources of these pollutions and the sources of these ecotoxicologies. And also in regards to political drivers, and I recognize that this was not a part of your presentation, so potentially not on your radar, but you know, we have to have conversations about incentives, like the Irrigation Acceleration Fund, which is, you know, $400 million of money for pollution, is, in my opinion. Compared to a freshwater improvement fund, which is $100 million. So, you know, for every $1 of cleanup, we've got $4 of pollution. So, you know, these things amount to the big drivers of this ecotoxicology problem that you're referring to, which, in my opinion, surmount more than recycling a little bit more, or driving a little bit less, or having a, you know, getting rid of your dog.
No, fair enough. I mean, I've just made a few, I just select a few examples, but you're quite right. It's what we have to do, we have to look at the system. and then make the best decisions in all aspects of what we're doing, you know, in terms of land use, land practices. I mean, from my perspective is, do we need to use so much pesticides? Because pesticides, you know, we're measuring them down on the coastal zone. And then the other thing is the use of fertilizers to maintain growth. And then, so there's very few people that know that there is now a cadmium task force put together by the MFE and MPI, and they're very happy about that. But me, I'd be very, very sad, because you see, why do we have that problem? It's because we've used those cheap fertilizers from South America that were, you know, contaminated with cadmium, and now we have created contaminated land. So, but yeah, no, it's yeah. Thank you.
Can you go and talk to her? I'm sorry, I'm going to keep strictly to time, and now it's time for a break. So please put your hands together for Louis Tremblay. You know, Louis Tremblay is an expert scientist, PhD, doctor in ecotoxicology of microcontaminants. When we grew up at school, the longest words we knew were corrugated iron and wheelbarrow. So you've added to our lexicon here today, Louis. And Louis has been here for 7 years with Cawthron, so he's gone from wee to kiwi. So again, see you in 11:15, and could you please make yourself known and ask your question to Louis directly. I'm sorry, we're running out of time, and we're going to start strictly at 11:15 with Liz Lambert and Martin Workman. Have a cup of tea.